I thought in the first half we did a really good job for the most part of really carrying over the things that we've emphasized and put into this game. And when we did that, I thought we were fine. We did a good job of sharing the ball, shooting it when we were ready, getting it where it needed to go. But it was almost like that wasn't enough a few times. I think our guys just we failed to have great consistency as to what we're doing and have really good carryover. Obviously, the second half. The start of the second half, it's just we dig these holes. It's really hard for us to overcome them. We had 5 of the first 7 possessions were turnover. They were frustrating, baffling turnovers. But we went into the game with the goal of having 8 or less turnovers because they're not going to force you into them. You'll force yourself into them. And then we wanted to really get on the offensive glass after shooting good open threes and get 18 offensive rebounds. Obviously, you finished the game with 7 offensive rebounds, 17 turnovers, and so we flipped those margins that we felt like we could really win with. So that's where that came from. And then we had a few stretches there that we really struggled to carry over what we had worked on and really emphasized and even walked through many times what South Alabama wanted to do offensively and how we wanted to take it away defensively. We did not have one consistent carryover of what we worked on, so that's frustrating. But our margin's too thin. We've talked about it, and we are a team that we need to almost be robotic in terms of doing things the way that we teach them to do them on both sides of the ball. And when we get away from that, you open the door for runs to happen in games, and that's what continues to happen with us. And I like our fight. We got down 16, came back, cut it to 4. It's a positive note, but we have to really understand what those runs, where they come from. And we've got to be more consistent with our execution on both sides of the ball and the things that we invest in and work on carrying over to the court.
You talk about those runs, and you've had significant leads in a few of the conference games that you've lost, and suffered those runs at a certain point during the game. Do you feel like they're starting to understand it at all, or is there a reason why it keeps happening?
If I knew the answer to that, I'd probably, fix it. There's an answer to it. We're teachers by trade, that my staff and I, and we love to teach. We love to, dive in and, learn about an opponent, learn about our team, figure out the way those things match up, to give yourself an opportunity to win. There's got to be some carryover. Maybe we need to change some of our approach as to how we're teaching some of these things. We won't lower the standard. We certainly can't do that. But maybe I'm not afraid to change the approach as to what we're doing with those types of things. But, yeah, it's concerning, and that's where those runs come from. We had a 9-point lead, and we go into halftime, only up 4. A lot of those turnovers, and just, we didn't guard one screen the way that we practiced it, and that's frustrating because our guys know, we've taught them, and so maybe my approach to teaching them's got to be a little bit different so that it resonates, and that walk from the huddle to the court's not quite as long to forget those things.
And along those lines of, trying to figure out how they respond to being taught, I mean, you and your staff have not been in this position in several years.
Yeah.
A guy like Eddie has not been in this position at this point in the season. But you have other guys who a losing record is kind of what they know.
True.
Like, how do you kind of, I guess, you've talked a lot about, JMU goes into any gym in this league and they kind of have a target on their back and things. Like, how do you kind of get guys to understand what the expectation is and where you think the season should be right now?
Yeah, that's a great point. We've been a little bit spoiled as a staff that we have not had a season quite like this in a while. But I'd like to think that when we did have a few seasons like this and the ones that we haven't, that we've learned from it. And that's a lot of what, recruiting transfers is a lot nowadays, right? And that's why a lot of guys want to come here. They want to come here because maybe they've played and gotten experience and maybe had some numbers, and they haven't won. And so they want to come to JMU because it gives them the best opportunity to win. And so they learn what comes with it, that you get everybody's best shot, that the stakes are high. And with that, you have to increase your urgency. You have to increase your focus. And you've got to certainly be better with those types of things. And so it's probably a different message than what a lot of those guys have heard in the past. That message kind of, adapts as the season goes on. I'm really patient with guys. To be honest with you, I don't know that I yelled too much tonight. I don't think these guys respond to that so well. To be honest with you, they respond better to, hey, let's do it again. Hey, we're going to do it right, or we're going to do it again. That's my old saying. You can ask my 13-year-old son that. He hates that one, but I say it all the time. It's the only way I know to do stuff. Either do it right or you do it again. And so the standard in the way we do things is not going to change. Our approach to maybe getting some of that to sink in might change. But, we're not going to throw in the towel by any means. I referenced our fight coming back, but also, at some point we have to understand what leads to those runs that get us from behind. And we got to fix them. I thought it was really poor with our bench engagement tonight. And what I mean by that is you'd have a guy make a mistake defensively on something that we'd really walked through and taught and done, and my staff's done an unbelievable job of teaching and preparing these guys. They really have. Only for the other guy to sub in for him and make the same mistake. That's frustrating, right? And so those are the types of things that when those guys were on losing teams before, it was probably okay. It's not okay here. And so that's a different message to them, because it's always been, I went in, I did the same thing the other guy did. We're not any good anyway. Well, we're going to be good. We're going to fight. We're going to do things the right way. It may not always show up on the scoreboard, but you better freaking be engaged on that bench and paying attention, especially if you're going to sub in for a guy who's making a mistake and you make the same one, because there'll be consequences for that, because the standard cannot be lowered despite what your winning record is coming in to JMU.
You got yourself in an opportunity to get back into this game. As you said, you cut it down to 4, but didn't cash in on those opportunities. Was it just as equally frustrating when Harris picks up his 3rd foul with 5:52 to go in the first half, and that did not hurt South Alabama? Was that because you weren't doing things defensively the way you thought you should?
Yeah, we couldn't stay in front of the basketball. And I thought we've done a much better job, and that was a huge problem of ours before Christmas, and we've gotten better with it. And that was a huge emphasis in this game, because they're not a great three-point shooting team. They shot it pretty well tonight, probably better than they had, but they live in the paint, and a guy like Harris is a big part of that. So when you take him out, you like your chances of being able to contain the dribble a little bit more, but we didn't do it. We didn't do it at all. We really struggled to stay in front of J.J. Weed. I thought he played a terrific game. Obviously, he drove our guts out in place of Chaz Harris. And, our guys knew who Adam Olson was coming into the game. You're not going to believe this. We knew everything about him and what he does well, and how they get him involved. But you would have thought he was a brand new guy walking in the game that we didn't know anything about when we gave him 17 points in the first half. It's frustrating when you can get their best player out of the game and then you let somebody else beat you. That's not typically how it's supposed to work. So
early on, it looked like you were doing some good things against that zone, because you were getting the ball dropped in low.
Yep.
Avoiding the high post, which we know is their real strength defensively in that zone. But what changed? How come that became a part of the game that no longer presented itself? You only took 13 shots inside the perimeter tonight.
Yeah, well, part of that, that's what they do, right? We knew you're going to take 43s or something like that. Simple ball security. Not meeting your pass, not being strong with it. When you catch the ball in the areas of the zone that we wanted to attack, what do you do with it? What's your mindset? And we had guys that didn't really meet passes. They weren't strong with it. and then they wanted to become facilitators instead of going and scoring the ball against someone that you have a size advantage against. And that's where a lot of those turnovers came from. We over-dribbled instead of just finishing like we could have. And so, as you mentioned, Kurt, there were times in the first half it looked exactly the way we wanted it to. Consistently, we weren't able to do that. And I think that had a lot more to do with us than it did with them this time around. So.
Hey, Coach. You mentioned that turnovers were an issue in this game, and ultimately JMU was outscored 24-3 off of turnovers alone. So, in preparation for your game on Saturday, what will your message to your team be in practice, and how you game plan differently going into that game to have less turnovers and not have that differential be so high?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know a lot about Texas State. I typically don't dive into that, second team until after this one's over with. But yeah, 17 turnovers you're going to have a hard time beating anybody, especially if you have that many live ball turnovers and allow them to get out, play in transition where you can't get your defense set. We're at our best when we can play good half-court defense. The only way that you can do that is you got to have great ball security. How we have that ball security is probably going to be different against Texas State. They don't play the same zone. I do think they play with a lot more pressure, which I do think we've done a better job of as of late. I was really encouraged with how we handled pressure and still was able to run our stuff and generate good shots and not turn the ball over against Marshall. So we're going to need to replicate that, and we're going to need to turn the page pretty quickly to make sure that we flip that turnover margin.